Sachin, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Doctor of the future is the patient.
And also, ultimately, they determine the outcome, not the practitioner, unless they're laying there having a surgery. So cortisol's main job in physiology is to raise blood sugar. And so we haven't eaten anything, so we need something to trigger the release of our increasing glucose levels, and that's what cortisol does. And so for most people, they miss that morning light cue, and then the rest of their biology is thrown off. And then they're in indoor lighting, which has only visible spectrums of light. The magic of the sun is invisible to us. I think we'll unpack today is how people can become their own best doctor. And once they know that, they realize how embarrassingly simple it is, and they're going to wish they knew this sooner, and they're going to wish they told their kids. And here's the thing, it's never too late, because your body's right now waiting for you to unlock its own medicine. So infrared light and UV light are very important signals to our biology that, again,
Today's guest is someone I've been following for a while, and I'm very excited to bring him onto the show. Sachin Patel. He is a father, husband, breathwork facilitator, plant medicine advocate, and founder of the Living Proof Institute. He's also the creator of the Perfect Practice Mentorship, where he trains health professionals from around the world to build conscious, heart-centered practices that truly heal. He's someone who deeply believes that the doctor of the future is the patient, a philosophy that really resonates with me. What I appreciate most about Sachin is that he is not just preaching theory, but he actually lives it. He blends the science, spirituality, and service in a way that feels grounded, powerful, and completely aligned with what we're trying to explore here on the Total Entrepreneur Mind, Body, Spirit. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to talk to you. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about was, I've heard you say that the doctor of the future is the patient. Talk to us about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So being a healthcare practitioner, one of the things you quickly realize is that no matter how good you are as a practitioner, the value of your service and the value of your message either comes to life or dies when the patient takes it and runs with it. And what I realized is that I could give people the most absolute best advice, but it's up to them to follow it. And also, ultimately, they determine the outcome, not the practitioner, unless they're laying there having a surgery. They're determining the outcome. And really, when you understand the magnitude of the problem that we have right now, the biggest challenge we have in healthcare is, A, we don't have solutions for even the most chronic of conditions and the most prevalent of conditions. We just have Band-Aids to manage people. And we wait in a reactionary way. And we have to get to a certain predetermined point of suffering and dysfunction and disease based on numbers that a system made up, right, and continues to make up. And so we're at the mercy of that system. And so that is not a viable solution. The solution isn't more functional medicine practitioners, to be quite frank. The solution is more healthy people. And so the way we create more healthy people and more healthy communities and societies is we teach people and reinforce that they are their own best medicine. And what I help people do is teach them how to access that medicine that resides inside each and every one of us, is available to each and every one of us in this moment, whether they are appreciative of that or not, it's there for them. We literally built ourselves from two cells, right? And these two cells came together and continued to divide and created this magic that we call life. And we are constantly in the process of rebuilding ourselves. In fact, right now, as people are listening to this or watching this, millions of cells, billions, and then eventually trillions of cells will quietly replace themselves. So we are literally a hologram of birth and death happening in every single moment. And so once we access that, paradigm of thinking, we realize, wow, I'm actually more in control than I think. And in fact, we are our own pharmacy. We are our own kind of self-creating organism, right? And we are influenced by our environment and our thoughts and, of course, our biology. And once you know what influences those things, what you realize is that none of it shows up on your doctor's lab testing. So the key factors that are deterministic in one's health are not going to show up on your lab testing. So your doctor is going to miss it every single time, because what the lab test tells me is what questions the doctor is asking. So if I'm looking for disease markers, the doctor is asking, do you have this disease that meets the criteria that this system has created, not are you living a life that is producing and creating health and unlocking your own medicine, which once you know how to do that is available to you 24/7. So that's why I think that us becoming our own doctors is the only solution, because anything else other than that bankrupts us morally, bankrupts us as a society financially, and is not the world that I want to create. I want to live in a world where everyone knows how to self-actualize themselves. And we have the data to prove it, that it's possible. We have the data to show that it happens very quickly, that the body does not resist. There are no side effects. The only effect is pure health. And it's almost like a plant. When a plant is wilting, if you give it what it needs, it immediately sprouts up. And if you don't give it what it needs, nothing really happens. And so I think we'll unpack today is how people can become their own best doctor. And once they know that, they realize how embarrassingly simple it is. And they're going to wish they knew this sooner, and they're going to wish they told their kids. And here's the thing, it's never too late, because your body's right now waiting for you to unlock its own medicine.
So you said a few things in there that I made a mental note of. The first was that we don't really have any solutions. And I think maybe medicine doesn't, but like you said, we have the solution, of course, right? But the other thing that you said was, and it reminded me of previous doctor's visits when I started my own journey. I knew I wasn't feeling well, but I wasn't clinical in terms of having a disease state that they could diagnose. So for example, you could have fasting glucose of 99, but until you're at 100, you're not pre-diabetic. Although all sorts of bad stuff could be going on in your body up until the point you get to 100, right? So is that what you're talking about a little bit when you say these states that the system creates and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So, how do we define disease, right? It's
Right.
like a mathematical equation. And so we're comparing everyone to the population,
A very sick
right? And
population, by the way.
continuously
Yeah.
sickening population, right? So
Yeah.
it's definitely trajecting in the wrong direction. So that's what our baseline comparison is. And so, if that's who we're being compared to, then that's not fair to us, because we might want to feel amazing, right? If your mechanic said, "Hey, I'm going to make you the average, and I'm going to assess the problems in your car based on the average of how other people take care of their car," you'd probably skip oil changes, you'd probably skip tire rotations, you'd probably skip routine maintenance, because most people don't maintain their vehicles the way they should. But if you're a car enthusiast or a health enthusiast, there's a maintenance schedule that your car needs, and it relies on that in order to function optimally. So when we're looking at blood work as an example, so here's some of the key pillars. There's three key pillars that affect our health. The first one is circadian biology. And circadian biology is really fascinating because every animal except humans, because we are animals biologically, right? We just have these amazing brains, but physiologically, we're just like a gorilla, right? It's not very much different.
Right.
And so what's interesting to understand is that animals passively, they don't have to think about these key pillars when it comes to health. So the chipmunk, when I talk to my clients, I point out a chipmunk or an animal that's living close to them. That animal is governing all of its biological processes and systems based on circadian rhythms and circadian biology. It doesn't know it's doing it. It just lives outside. That's just what it does. And so whether you believe in just this universe and this world as a complete fluke of things that had to happen, or whether you believe it's created in the image of perfection, it's living in synergy with its environment. And so bright days and dark nights are very important. You might hear someone like Jack Kruse say this. And what we've done is we've created dark days and bright nights. And the position of the sun changes the wavelengths of light that are passing through the atmosphere, which changes the message that the light is sending to our body, changes the angle at which the light is coming into our eyes, and therefore changes the biological functions that are taking place. So just like we know in different rooms in our house, the lighting is better at different times of the day, right? Think of it that way. We're lighting up different rooms in our eyes, on our retina, to signal to our body what time of day it is and what biological processes and hormones need to be secreted at this time. So for example, morning bright light increases dopamine production, because we need dopamine to get us moving, to keep us focused, to feel reward right after we accomplish a task. it also increases cortisol, because we need cortisol to increase blood sugar. So I find it interesting that doctors want you to measure your blood sugar first thing in the morning when it's supposed to be highest. So
Hmm.
cortisol's main job in physiology is to raise blood sugar. Okay. And so we haven't eaten anything, so we need something to trigger the release of our increasing glucose levels, and that's what cortisol does. And so for most people, they miss that morning light cue, and then the
Hmm.
rest of their biology is thrown off. And then they're in indoor lighting, which has only visible spectrums of light. The magic of the sun is invisible to us. So infrared
Hmm.
light and UV light are very important, signals to our biology that, again, create a cascade of hormone production, that increase melanin production, that are most people don't know this, but your skin, when it's exposed to the sun, turns your body into a battery. It structures the
Hmm.
water in your body. It increases nitric oxide production. It reduces any friction of your arteries passing through your body because of a process called sulfation. So all these things happen just by being in the sun. And our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have naturally been outdoors most of the time. I just came back from
Hmm.
a 4-day backcountry trip. No service, no cell phones, no screens,
Hmm.
just the
Hmm.
sun. That was our guide, and it was a new moon, so there was no like light at
Hmm.
night. So super bright days, outdoor, outside all day, and then we aligned our biology rising and setting with the sun. And it was just
Hmm.
miraculous. Like I felt like 5 years younger when I came back
Hmm.
because we literally reset our whole nervous system. So the first pillar is
Yeah.
circadian biology, and we can certainly unpack that more. The second pillar is nervous system regulation. So, most people these
Hmm.
days, because they take on the burdens of everything that's happening around them, right? They take on Elon Musk's burdens, they take on Donald Trump's burdens, they take on
Hmm.
the FBI's burdens, right? Or whatever they're into,
Right.
right? Or they take on the burden of, all the challenges, the wars and stuff that are going on in the world. So, we have a completely dysregulated nervous system. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, it doesn't matter what supplements you take. It doesn't matter what foods you eat. In fact, you don't even digest your food properly when you're sympathetic dominant. And
Hmm.
so food actually becomes a poison if you don't digest it, right? It literally rots in your digestive
Hmm.
system and creates putrefactive factors that feed, toxic bacteria. And so well digested food is medicine, undigested food is a toxin. And the
Hmm.
determinant in whether we're going to digest that food or not is our nervous system, the state of our nervous system when we are consuming that food and when it's in our digestive system. So most
Hmm.
people have no awareness of the state of their nervous system. It's like your transmission. They've got their transmission in reverse and they want to go forward. Right? It doesn't matter what fuel I put in the car. It doesn't matter how aligned my tires are. It doesn't matter how shiny my wax is, right? What
Hmm.
matters is what gear am I in and where am I trying to go? And most people have a mismatched nervous system. So they're in stress when they're trying to rest and when they're wanting to rest and digest, right? So this affects their sleep, this affects their digestion, this affects their cardiovascular system. And then the third pillar is rest and recovery. And this is something that entrepreneurs especially have a hard time with because, they like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? Or they don't really,
Exactly. Yeah.
sleep in recovery are not very sexy, but are essential, right? It's like pulling the bow back. And when we use data like Aura Ring data to track our clients and monitor them, what we find and uncover within a couple of weeks is they have way too much stress and not enough recovery. So their nervous
Hmm.
system is dysregulated. So circadian rhythm, nervous system regulation, and proper rest and recovery, that none of that shows up on lab work, but is
Hmm.
absolutely essential for you to know this information about yourself. So wearables can be a great tool. If somebody's concerned about blood sugar, then I would suggest a CGM. So you have
Hmm.
incremental data that's showing you, what is actually causing the blood sugar to be
Yeah.
elevated. What some people don't know is that blue light actually increases your blood sugar response. So for
Yeah. I
example,
just learned that.
you could have the exact same meal, and if you have it in front of a television which is emitting blue light, and you have it outside where you get full spectrum light, it's going to have a different effect on your blood sugar, right?
Hmm.
And so we can change, if we don't change our diet, if we change our diet but don't change the conditions under which we eat, it's not going to have the therapeutic benefit that we think it's going to have. So people who've tried everything, tried every diet, and they don't feel good, it's probably not the diet, it's probably their digestive system. and nervous system.
There's so much to talk about in that, in those three pillars. But what it made me think of was, I work with young founder CEOs all the time. And when we talk about this type of thing, the analogy I use is that you're taking, it would be like you take the most important function in your business and just outsource it to somebody who's really not all that good at it. Right. So, like, what we're doing is we're kind of abdicating our responsibility for our own health to somebody who isn't really that good at it for us personally, right? Maybe they're good at it at a population level for, trauma and really sick people, but it seems like we have to take that agency back
Mhm.
to really maximize our own health.
Right. I 100% agree. And what I would add to that is not just someone, but something. Right. So there's a
Ah,
lot of, like, in the spiritual world, we call it spiritual bypassing, when,
mm,
you don't want to fix the problem. You just want to keep going to plant medicine retreats, instead of actually addressing the root cause of the issue.
right.
So we think more medicine is going to fix the problem. And some people do, health bypassing, where they think, okay, I'm just going to get a red panel and not change anything, and that's going to fix everything, or I'm going to just take more supplements. And I'll give you a really quick
Mhm.
story. I had a friend of mine who came over, and he's been seeing a practitioner for quite some time, and I just started asking, like, he was asking for some guidance, so I started just probing and asking some questions, and I quickly realized that he was applying none of the three pillars. And once
Hmm.
I explained it to him, I said, "Listen, there's not much difference from you biologically than, if we think about it, than a plant, right? A plant needs water, it needs sunlight, it needs nutrients from the soil, it needs the right ratios of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the air. It needs the right environment for it to thrive in, and it needs love, right? It needs all those things.
Mhm.
But if I give it more water, and I tell the plant, listen, I'm going to give you extra water this week, but I'm going to put you in a dark closet, right? How's that going to work out? Right? There's no amount of
Mhm.
water that you can give a plant to make up for a lack of sunlight. So just like,
Right.
we need sunlight, the plant needs sunlight as well. We need those triggers. They're biologically necessary. So I tell people to study animals, study nature, right? What are the things
Mhm.
that animal is likely taking for granted or not even thinking about? And how many of those are you doing? Are you grounding every day? Well, that squirrel's grounding every day. Are you aligning your
Mhm.
biology with the rising and setting of the sun? Every animal, plant, insect, right, aligns its biology, right? So when the sun's coming up, the birds know, they start making noises.
Mhm.
When the sun goes down, the mosquitoes start coming out, right? Everything aligns
Yeah.
with the rising and setting of the sun, except humans. So
Mm.
until that happens, nothing changes. So he was having low energy issues. And I'm like, well, the first thing is your sleep is probably the problem, and recovery is the issue. So we pulled out his Aura ring, and we discovered his stress was high, recovery was low. And so I said,
Hmm.
listen, more exercise isn't going to help you, because that's creating more stress on your body. What you need is to go for a walk in the woods in the morning, and try to do that, middle of the day, and try to do that in the evening if you can. And literally, there's no better advice that I could give you than doing just that. No more supplements, no more gadgets. You just
Mhm.
have to go back to the basics and realize that these are
Mhm.
non-negotiables, right? Just like
Right.
water and sunlight and all the things I mentioned about a plant are non-negotiable, we also have non-negotiables that were passive, to us. We didn't have to think about them. So we
Mhm.
were naturally grounded. We were naturally lining with circadian rhythms. We were naturally sitting and eating, right? And getting ourselves in
Mhm.
a state of rest and digest. Our nervous systems were regulated because we could express ourselves emotionally, right? Whether it's through, crying or laughing or playing instruments, right? We all had outlets. Drumming is a great outlet for people, right? To get rid of the excess adrenaline in their body, right? We were moving our bodies, so we would get rid of the adrenaline, and whatever stressors we had were our own, right? Or of our small
Mhm.
tribe. So I went with a group of 8 people, and when you're disconnected from what's happening in the world, you're so present to the next step you're taking. You're so present to, are we moving our boat in the right direction? And everything else, dissolves. All the illusions of life start dissolving.
Hmm.
And that's how our biology is set up, right? It's not designed to take on all the problems of all the tribe members of all the tribes in the world, which is what's happening
Right.
to us. So our nervous systems are just bombarded. And so for him, and he's a very successful entrepreneur, in his 30s, I'm like, dude, you got to fix this now. Otherwise, it's not always going to be this way.
Yeah. And he won't enjoy the fruits of his labor laid into his life.
Hmm.
It seems like we've got so much technology and advancement accessible to us that we're kind of forgetting the simple stuff, right? So it almost seems like, well, sunlight and grounding really can't be that helpful because we've got all this money we've spent on drug R&D and med tech, and that's really the stuff that's going to be helpful. Whereas, the sunlight's been around forever. How much can that really help, right? Or how much is it really going to help to get your feet in the earth? I mean, that's not very technologically advanced, but it seems to me that there is an ancient wisdom to that we've just forgotten, and it's to our detriment.
Yeah, I mean, here's what's really interesting about science, John. I think you'll find this quite fascinating. Is that every year do we do more science or less science?
I would guess we do
Yeah,
more.
exponentially more, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the number of articles that have been published over the last 100
Yeah.
years, it's like a hockey stick, right?
Yeah.
Which means we have more questions, which
Hmm.
means we actually know less.
Hmm. Right.
So if we use science as our guide, science tells us just with the amount of research that's taking place is that it knows nothing. So what are we
Hmm.
hanging our hats on? Right? I'd rather hang my hat on, just observing what nature has to offer. Nature is the greatest, like a tree is one of the greatest technologies that exists because
Hmm.
it's learned to live in congruence with its environment and take and give back and live for hundreds of years in these ecosystems, and we haven't figured that out. So what makes us
Hmm.
more intelligent than a tree? Right, we're destroying
Right.
our own habitat by the second. Right, we're
Hmm.
irresponsible as citizens of this planet. Right, and we have this beautiful world that we could take better care of, but it starts by taking better care of ourselves. And so I look at nature as my greatest teacher, and it's already figured all this stuff out. In fact, nature has solved
Hmm.
problems that we haven't even created yet.
Right. Yeah. What's an example of one?
Well, if you think about it, most drugs are derivatives of plants, right? So
Exactly.
so the
Yeah.
solutions already exist in nature, but they're not patentable,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Which reminds me, that's why, there's probably not a lot of peer-reviewed studies on sunlight as a healing modality or grounding as a healing modality because you can't turn it into a profit model, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, the way we live life right now, the analogy I would use is somebody throws you in the middle of a pool or somebody lands in the middle of the pool, they have no idea how to swim. And so the the and I want to say this before I say any of this is that I love doctors, I love
Hmm.
nurses. They saved my wife's
Absolutely.
life. However, they're good people in a paradigm that doesn't serve the client properly, or there's
Hmm.
more that even they know that they can give, but the limitation isn't their heart and their knowledge; it's the system that they're in, right? And it's hard to break out of that system because
Hmm.
it just is, right? The societal
Yeah.
structures are set up this way. And that's why I'm so glad I'm an entrepreneur first and a doctor second, so I could break free from that system and then, teach what I learned along the way to other practitioners so they can break free and they can do what's right, what they know in their heart is right, right? So I work with cardiologists, endocrinologists, nephrologists, chiropractors, naturopaths who see that this model is broken and the way that it's societally constructed is broken. We need to create something superior to it, right? So that's what we're all doing together. So what happens in our current medical system is, unfortunately, doctors and nurses are trapped there. They don't have the entrepreneurial know-how to get out of that system. It can potentially pay really well, right? So we have what are called golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when it comes to, that person who's now struggling in the pool, which is your average patient, you have the one person that throws in, that let's call them the traditional Western medical system. They throw in a life preserver, right? So one of those lifesavers. They throw in the lifesaver, but the lifesaver dissolves, and as it dissolves, it makes the pool more toxic. And then we come back 2 hours later and they're still in the middle of the pool. They're still drowning. We throw them another lifesaver, right? But again, the more lifesavers we keep throwing at them over time, the pool becomes more and more toxic. It's toxifying the water that they're in. So eventually the toxic water kills them, not the drowning. Okay. And that's how most people are, right? We're just throwing them lifesavers. We're throwing drugs at them.
Hmm.
And then the natural healer comes along and he throws them a natural, lifesaver, but it's still dissolving. right? So they have to still keep taking it. And then someone like me comes along, or perhaps someone like you comes along and says, hey, let me teach you how to swim, right? And then it doesn't matter. One quote that I love, I don't know if I came up with this, but I love it, is that it doesn't matter how deep the water is if you know how to swim,
Right.
right? If you don't know how to swim,
Yeah, I
you can
love that.
drown in 2 inches of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you know how to swim, it doesn't matter if the water is 10 feet deep or 10,000 feet deep, because you
Right.
just got to stay at the surface there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, it's scarier the deeper it is. But if you know how to swim, you're good, right? If you know how to tread water, you're
Mm-hmm.
good. So let's teach people how to swim to the shore, right? Or how to tread water, so they're not relying on something external. And guess what? Every time I throw you a life preserver, do I strengthen you or do I weaken you? Right? Do I
Yeah,
build
right.
your
Yeah,
belief in
weekends.
yourself or do I weaken your belief in yourself? Do I
Mm-hmm.
unlock your medicine or do I, bury it deeper inside of you?
And I think that's just another, I guess, example or a symptom, right? We've come to rely so much on the third party, on the expert, on the doctor, who, like you said, was trained in a certain way, not necessarily to optimize your health span or well-being, but to treat chronic disease and to keep you alive longer with chronic disease. And like you said, massive respect to doctors. I mean, they can fix a broken body. If you have severe trauma, there is nobody else
Hmm.
you want to see besides these people,
Yep.
right? But because of the way they're trained and because of the way we've been almost socialized or trained, we kind of give up our control over our own health to this system. And I think that's one of my goals, is to help people, especially young entrepreneurs, take it back. Because like you said, there is that grind culture where they'll sleep when they're dead and on and on. And, I want to help people understand that they have to put themselves in the position of being the CEO of their body, of their well-being, and not to just outsource it to somebody who isn't really great at it.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's, and they're, um, and I know you intended to say this too. In all fairness, they're great at what they do. Just like a firefighter
Yeah,
is
right.
great at what they do. But if I have a squeaky door, right, and I call the fire department, they're going to tell me to buzz
Hmm.
off, right? They're going to be like,
Right.
"Where there's no
Exactly.
fire here, right? You don't meet the
Right.
criteria for where we provide the best service." Now,
Right.
that being said, you call a carpenter or you call a handyman, but if your house is burning down, you call a handyman, right? He's not going
Hmm.
to be able to save you with his screwdriver, right? So there's a
Right.
time and place. And so many
Hmm.
people are going to the fire department, and the fire department is saying there's nothing wrong with you because you don't meet their predetermined criteria.
Right.
Where,
Because your house isn't on
right,
fire.
but your
Yeah.
house is in disarray, right?
Right.
And when we do
Yeah.
call the fire department, God forbid that ever happens to anyone listening to this or anyone in general, um, they're going to destroy your house in the process, right?
Hmm.
So they're going to save your house and you're going to be grateful, right? But your house is going to be, you're going to have to, like, it's going to be water damaged, right? There's going to be all kinds of stuff. They
Hmm.
might have to break down the doors or windows, whatever the case may be, to do whatever
Hmm.
they can to save you. So, or save your house. And so the same type of analogy applies to traditional healthcare, right? It's
Hmm.
what are we looking for, right? And just like you can take your car to a body shop if it's banged up, right? That's different than going to driving school. And
Right.
driving school prevents the accident, right? Becoming self-actualized in terms of really simple health practices to unlock our own inner potential. It's really simple. Once somebody teaches you how to
Hmm.
do it, it's not even, here's the thing, John, it's not even me teaching you anything new. It's helping you remember who you are.
Yeah. Well, so let's turn our attention there. So, how can we start to do that, right? What are some of your go-to recommendations, or if you're starting from scratch with somebody who really just needs to, start with the basics? Well, how do you start with them?
Yeah, great question. So, first, we have to be committed, right? And one of
Hmm.
the ways that I find, we show our commitment is by hiring an expert. Because right now we live in an age where information has basically zero value. We almost have too much information.
Hmm.
And because we have so much information and it can be conflicting at times, we don't know what's right and what's wrong. So, what we actually need is an age of mentorship. What we're entering, I believe, is an age of mentorship and wisdom where somebody who's, let's say, been in practice for 20 years, right, is going to have all this experience and knowledge and awareness and intuition that we may not have, right? So even in the age of AI, it's not just about, throwing your tests in there. You might not even know what questions to tell it, right? Or what prompt to give
Right.
it, right? So you still have to know how to utilize that information to create a plan. One thing I'll say is that when I work with clients, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs in particular. And one of the things that we find with them is they feel like the solution has to be complicated. We
Exactly.
already,
Right.
Da Vinci said it best, the ultimate sophistication is simplicity.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs echoed that, right? So the whole, framework of Apple, the whole like kind of overarching, theme around Apple and their products when Steve Jobs was at the helm is simplicity, right? That's why the
Hmm.
phone only had one button, right? And so uh, if we take that as and apply it as a law, or at least a very, very palpable theory, then there's nothing more sophisticated than the human body, which means that it should, in theory, following that concept, be the simplest thing to take care of. And that's what makes it sophisticated. Something isn't sophisticated if it's clunky. And so once people understand that paradigm shift, right?
Mm.
You think about a tree, like you you just have to the seed just plants itself, right, from the previous generation,
Yeah.
that it just needs water, dirt, soil, and a little bit of protection,
Yeah.
right, from its surrounding, and it gets nutrients just like we get wisdom. It gets nutrients from the
Hmm.
mycelial network underneath, and it grows, right, and that little tiny acorn turns into an oak tree. It's simple, right? It's not overly
It is.
complicated. If we had to match the complexity of the tree to take care of it, right, there would be no trees around,
Right.
right? So our
Hmm.
bodies are the same way. They are absolutely, in fact, I would argue, embarrassingly simple to take care of. When you're doing the right things, it's embarrassingly simple. And that's what makes something easy to do also makes it easy not to do.
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel like making an investment in yourself, right? So you really value the information and put it into action. And having a way to track is very important. So we give our clients an
Hmm.
Aura ring, and we track
Yeah.
their metrics daily so that we're able to monitor their sleep cycles. We're able to monitor their resting heart rate and HRV. We're able to see trends
Hmm.
as they're making these changes, and they are able to see that too. So I believe healthcare needs to shift to a model where we have really short feedback loops. So the longer the
Hmm.
feedback loop, the more useless the information is, right? So if I
Yeah.
test your blood, even if I test it once a month, right, that's very different than testing it every 15 minutes,
Hmm.
which is what happens when you have a CGM. Every 15 minutes,
CGM.
it's
Yeah.
it's looking at your blood sugar in real time. So you can make very
Hmm.
targeted and actionable decisions and kind of gamify the healing process as well. So I feel like making that investment, hiring wisdom, okay, because wisdom is like a time machine. It saves you time, it saves you
Hmm.
money, and you can get somewhere in 90 days that might take you 10 years to figure out on your own, right?
Right.
And it's all figure outable. It's just the question is how long. And if you apply it sooner, you can benefit sooner. And if you what I love about what I at least teach to people is everything we teach is modelable. I don't know if that's a word, but if I get you going outside, right, then that's something your whole family will benefit from. So what I teach are timeless principles that will be valid and relevant today, tomorrow, 100 years from now. They would have been valid 1,000 years ago, and they'll be valid 1,000 years in the future. That's what I like to teach my clients, not the latest fad or the latest trend, because sometimes you
Hmm.
find out that that's probably not the thing, right? Or next month
Right.
there's something else that's out. Next month there's something else that's out. So you're always living in this sense of I don't know enough or I don't have enough and I have to buy and do all these things in order for me
Hmm.
to, live forever, right? Or live longer or live a higher quality of life. Simplicity creates the highest quality of life. And so, getting up, getting outside within the first hour of the day is hugely important, unfiltered. So, if you can help it, no glasses, no contact lenses, no sunglasses for sure, and no windows. You want to literally get outside because the windows block certain wavelengths of light. And so you're missing
Hmm.
the invisible spectrums of light, which is where the magic and the medicine of the sun resides. you want to really dial into your nervous system. Um, just like if I were to eat a high sugar meal first thing in the morning, my blood sugar would just do this roller coaster all day. Our nervous system is the same way. So we really want to get grounded first thing in the morning so that we have a stable nervous system. So our morning should be restorative, right? We shouldn't just get out of bed and go right into fight or flight, because that just sets the stage for our blood sugar and our nervous system for the rest of the day. So having an intentional morning practice is hugely, hugely important. And as you start practicing these principles, it doesn't mean you have to take any time out of your day. Just be intentional, right? If you enjoy your coffee in the morning, turn it into a meditation. If you are taking a shower, right? What can you be doing in the shower, stacking in the shower, that improves your quality of life? So it could be something as simple as humming, which increases nitric oxide. You could end the shower cold, which increases your dopamine. And you're already doing hard things first in the morning, and things that you resist first thing in the morning builds a part of our brain that is absolutely critical to decision making and personal growth and development. It's called the anterior cingulate nucleus. And so we find that when people do things that are hard, that part of the brain grows. And people who are obese, for example, have smaller anterior cingulate nucleuses because they don't do hard things, they do easy things. Okay, so we can actually reshape our brain by doing things like this. Okay, so the more you're hearing this and resisting, the more growth potential you actually have. Whereas somebody who loves cold showers doesn't grow from them. Okay, because we look forward to it. So it's actually not growing us. And I'm not saying that you have to like now do an ice bath or anything like that, but just keep that in mind. So, how can we stack our habits in the morning? Morning sunlight, centering our nervous system, having awareness and turning our morning into a meditative practice instead of a stress practice. We could be doing all the same things, but just with a slightly different intention, and do them with love. Right? That's another important thing. Meal timing is also important. So studies are now showing that having a breakfast in the morning is actually is a good idea, and it's better to have breakfast and an early dinner than it is to have a late breakfast or lunch and a late dinner. So if we can move that feeding window to earlier in the day, that's going to help us align our circadian biology better.
Yeah.
Getting outside periodically throughout the day is also really important. I spend my day outside, so I'll be on this interview with you, and then all my work is going to be done outside today. I try to soak up as much of the summer as I can, because in the winter it's a little bit harder, right? My body is now paying attention to the way shadows are being cast, is changing the time of day in the part of my brain that keeps track of that. So all my biological processes are going to work so much more effectively. Moving throughout the day. So not just moving once in the morning and maybe once in the evening, but if you can get up and move around every 15 to 20 minutes or so, that's actually much more effective. So sitting isn't bad for you. Our ancestors and animals in nature sit often, but they're not sitting for extended periods of time. So just get up and move around. That's going to be super helpful. The other thing I want people to pay attention to is their breath. The breath is the steering wheel of the nervous system. And so, and that could be a whole conversation, but the breath is basically the window into the nervous system. So I could tell just by the way somebody is breathing what state their nervous system is in. So if somebody's breathing short and shallow, I know they're more in a sympathetic or fight or flight type of state. If they're breathing through their mouth, I know that they're sympathetic in this moment. Okay. If they're breathing slowly and through their nose, and I can tell that their tongue is positioned correctly at the roof of their mouth, that's going to create a soothing effect on the nervous system. So these are all things that we can pay attention to and have more awareness around. And just like we can drive to work without thinking much about it, we can go through the entire day and not think much about our breath. But it literally is grabbing your nervous system by the steering wheel and guiding it in the direction you want it to go in. So if I need more focus, there's a breath for that. If I need more strength, there's a breath for that. If I need to, if I'm going on a run, there's a breath for that. If I'm trying to go to sleep, there's a breath for that. So breath is both an art and a science. And once you learn the different ways to breathe, you get a predictable response in your physiology every single time. Our body, the first thing in our nervous system that changes outwardly is our breath. So if a lion were to walk into your office, you would immediately gasp. If you felt a sense of relief, you would sigh. If I said something funny, you would laugh. If you were upset, you would cry, right? These are all forms of breath work. We don't necessarily view them that way, but they are. And it's our nervous system, expressing itself through the breath, because when we change our breath, it changes our internal physiology. For example, when you gasp, your lungs expand very quickly, squeezing your heart, immediately increasing blood pressure so you could run away or fight off whatever is coming after you, because now we're going to send blood from the trunk, we're going to send it to the arms and legs, right? So it makes sense for you to gasp. Whereas when we feel a sense of relief, we sigh, right? Because our lungs release grief, and our diaphragm is where we store our trauma. So we just kind of let all of it, out, and we release that stress that we were feeling, and we now feel a sense of relief. So you can exaggerate these breathing, these different breaths that the body already uses, and then tap into that, right? So if I wanted to increase your heart rate, I could have you breathe a certain way, right? If I wanted to pump you up, I could have you breathe a certain way. If I wanted to increase adrenaline, for example, right, I would do something called bellows breath. You see Tony Robbins do this, right? So basically breathing in and out really, really fast 30 times for 3 sets, your heart rate and your blood pressure are going to get pumping. Your adrenaline is going to be high, right? Because we're using the breath to tell the nervous system what state we want to be in. Yeah. If you were trying to fall asleep, I would have you do a 4-7-8 breath. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, let it out for 8. That tells your nervous system you're safe. And a good high quality sleep starts with feeling safe. And so our nervous system has to feel safe. But if your breath if your breath isn't in that state, it's like you want to go put your car in park, but you're still stuck in drive, right? Expecting the car not to go anywhere. So breath is a wonderful access point to the nervous system that you have available to you 23,000 times a day. I encourage people to mouth tape at night. It's a great insurance policy to keep their mouth closed and breathe through their nose. Nasal breathing is one of the most important modalities that we recommend to our clients. You want to be breathing through your nose as much as humanly possible, because your mouth is the dirtiest part of your body and puts a huge tax on your dental health and a huge tax on your lung microbiome. And so when you're breathing through your nose, it cleanses and purifies, pressurizes, moisture regulates, temperature regulates the air. It perfects the air before it goes into the lungs. The number one chronic condition in America is periodontal disease. And periodontal disease is rooted in mouth breathing. So the way we breathe has a huge effect on our heart health, has a huge effect on our lymphatic health. Your biggest lymph nodes in your body are underneath your diaphragm, right? And so if I was an intelligent creator, that's exactly where I'd put them, because 23,000 times a day, my lymphatic system for my trunk is going to get pumped, right? We actually have two pistons that pump our trunk. We have our pelvic floor muscles, and we have our diaphragm. That diaphragm's like a dome, and as we breathe in and out, this whole system pumps. But if your breath is short and shallow, right, guess what? Now your lymphatic drainage is not that good. Now your heart isn't getting the assistance that it normally would from the diaphragm. The diaphragm is referred to as the second heart. And so when we start looking at our breath a little bit more closely, we start realizing how important and valuable it is in helping us be healthy and feel healthy. The other thing that's interesting about our breath is that we consume 30 pounds of air a day, which means we interface with our outside environment more with our lungs each day than the amount of food that we eat in a week. And your lungs are about this, the square footage of a tennis court, just like your digestive system. They're about the same surface area. So your lungs are a very important interaction that you have with the outside world. Imagine breathing in the surface area of a tennis court in and out with each breath, right? Think about how amazing that is, and it's happening 23,000 times a day. So yeah, I feel like when people understand the importance of breathing, they also understand, when we break it down for them, is the importance of nasal breathing on nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is our immune system. Just to go back one step, our immune system actually starts in our nose. So if you were to ask me, where does your immune system start? Most people get that most people get that question wrong. It starts in your nose, because all the air you breathe in is exposing itself to the inside environment, and you have a microbiome in your lungs and in your nasal cavity that's interacting with it. Nitric oxide kills viruses and bacteria on contact. So it actually is antiviral. Why was nobody
Mm.
teaching us how to breathe when we had this thing going around, right? If I don't
Yeah.
know if it even was a thing, but um, so nitric oxide increases that or through nasal breathing. We increase it sixfold through nasal breathing, 15-fold through humming. So you can hum in the
Mm.
shower, that increases nitric oxide 15-fold. And there's all the research to show this. The other thing that's interesting about nasal nitric oxide is nitric oxide increases microcirculation.
Mm.
And so it originally, and lowers blood pressure. So originally when they developed Viagra, Viagra is a nitric oxide recycling drug. They initially developed Viagra to help people with lowering blood pressure because that's what nitric oxide does. If you're in your 40s, your nitric oxide goes super downhill very quickly. Okay. So we want to do everything we can to preserve it or take supplementation to increase it. And it's really easy to test your nitric oxide levels with a saliva test. So nitric oxide is so Viagra was initially developed to recycle our own nitric oxide. But if you don't have the precursors to nitric oxide, then Viagra doesn't work for you because you don't have anything to work with. But what they discovered with Viagra, and most studies are done on men, and what they discovered is that this blood pressure medication that they thought they were developing had a very interesting side effect, that it caused, for men, it caused erections, right? Prolonged erections because it increased microcirculation. Men were also, and women were also given Viagra during COVID because that increases nitric oxide. And because of the antiviral properties of nitric oxide, that's why it was being prescribed to people.
Mm.
And so nitric oxide increases microcirculation. Now, the hardest place to get blood to, you know where it is, John? The hardest place to get blood to?
Oh, your feet? I don't know. I don't know.
Good guess, right? Because sometimes our feet are cold. It's actually the
Right.
brain.
Brain. Oh, I
So
wouldn't have guessed that. I would have thought just naturally that would be easier
yeah, well,
for some
remember
reason. Yeah.
to get blood to our feet, gravity's doing most of the work, right?
Mm.
But to get blood
Gotcha.
to our brain, the circulatory system's very tiny there and minuscule, and we're working against
Uh,
gravity, right?
mm.
So imagine somebody's nitric oxide levels are low because of the way they're breathing. They're not oxygenating and enriching their brain as much as
Mm.
they would if they were breathing through their nose with higher nitric oxide levels.
Wow.
So we can actually unlock another level of creativity and cognitive function. Nitric oxide addresses all three of the major causes of dementia and cognitive decline.
Mm.
So, very simple to test. You can buy nitric oxide saliva test strips online, test it on your tongue, usually first thing in the morning, before eating or drinking anything, and you'll know within 10 seconds if your nitric oxide levels are where they need to be. And then, if they're not, you can supplement with it, retest after 90 minutes, and you'll see that your nitric oxide levels pop back up to where they need
Mm.
to be. And now you've unlocked another level of sexual health, another level of cardiovascular health, another level
Mm.
of cognitive health by simply increasing nitric oxide. And the fastest way you could do that is by starting to breathe as much as you can, as exclusively as you can through your nose, and particularly at night, which is when we are in the most parasympathetic state. And in that parasympathetic state, so if you think about this, rest and recovery occurs when we're in our most relaxed state. Just like if I need to take my car to the mechanic, I can't repair the car while I'm driving it around, right? I've got to put it in
Mm.
park and put it up on a hoist. And that's what happens when we're sleeping, right? Our brain goes through a car
Mm.
wash, right? We have a whole lymphatic system. It takes about 7-8 hours
Mm.
to clean the brain every night. So it goes through its own like detailing and waxing process, if you will. And then when if we're breathing through our nose, we're telling our body we're safe. When we tape our mouth and put our tongue at the roof of our mouth, it relaxes our nervous system.
Mm.
Okay. Now I know some people may have physical reasons like deviated septums and things like that
Mm.
make it hard for them to breathe through their nose. There's, obviously surgery would be an extreme intervention if needed. That might be the right thing for people. Joe Rogan had his deviated septum corrected and retrained how to breathe, right? So it's possible. The other thing that you can do is you can wear something called an intake, which is a magnetic clip that goes out on the outside of your nose and opens up your nostrils. I found that to be the most effective one.
Mm.
And you can practice good sinus hygiene. Remember, this is where your immune system starts. And you are as old as your immune system. So anything that degrades the quality of your immune system degrades the quality of your longevity. So now they're actually
Mm.
looking at the age of the immune system as the key marker for biological age versus chronological age. So how do we take care of our immune system actually through our breath, believe it or not.
Yeah, the more I learn about breath and breath work, the more it becomes important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot there, and it just goes back to this. We've lost ancient wisdom, right? And what I love about all of these things we're talking about is that they don't cost you anything. You don't need a pill for it.
Mm-hmm.
They're accessible to you. You just have to know about it.
Yeah, it's one of
So
those.
yeah,
It's some of those things that cost you not to do them,
right,
right?
exactly. Yeah, can't afford not to,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And then I'll just unpack. I know I've been talking a lot, so you'll have to excuse me. I get really excited about
No,
this stuff.
it's great. It's amazing. I'm enjoying this a lot.
Also, I just want to close a loop on the day. So I'll leave it at this because there's like so many things I could talk about. One is you want to end your day right.
Mm,
So I look at it, what I found really helped for me is I don't look at tomorrow as the start of tomorrow. I look at tonight as the start of tomorrow.
yeah.
And so if I look at it that way, right, then my morning routine actually starts usually the day before because the morning sunlight's super
Mhm,
important. So, but I would say like it's easier to think us to think of okay, tomorrow starts right now, right?
mhm,
How do I want my tomorrow to go? So I watch the sunrise and sunset as many days as I can, right? I'm not perfect, but as
mhm.
many days as I can. I have
Yeah.
a beautiful spot right here where I sit, where I can see it, and
Mhm,
uh, and so that's like a good way to start winding down. And that tells your brain based on the sun is more orange and red at night. So you have more infrared light and more red
mm,
light coming in. Virtually no blue or green light. Water is water looks black at night, and so do leaves. They look black at night because there's no blue or green light for them to reflect. That's why they look black.
mm,
And so there's no blue or green light in the evening.
mm,
And so what we need to do is we need to follow that model. So I turn off all overhead lighting after the
mhm.
sun goes down. I put on my blue blockers if I'm going to watch
Me
TV,
too.
and I
Yeah.
turn on my red bulbs in my house. So now
Mhm.
I'm not
Same here.
perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that creates a perfect end cap for the evening. I don't open my computer screen after like a certain time unless I absolutely have to, but usually after 6 I don't look at my computer anymore. I don't look at my phone after that time if I can help it, and I just start winding down. So our light cues are very important to signaling the appropriate hormones and neurotransmitters that we need to produce to create good quality sleep. And so you can't produce adequate amounts of melatonin if your cortisol level is high because they're antagonists to one another.
Mm, amazing. Sachin, this was such a valuable conversation, and I really appreciate your time and expertise. And if people were interested in finding you or learning more about your work, where could they go?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So they can certainly follow me on Facebook at
Hmm.
Sachin Patel DC. That's my personal page. That's where I do most of my posting. They can follow me on Instagram at the Sachin Patel. And we have some great tools and resources. Our morning routine is a great resource, so they can go
I
to
saw that.
www.morningroutine.ca. And
Mhm.
if they want to learn more about our programs and what it might look like working together, they can go to mymetabolicreset.ca. And we work with clients remotely all over Canada and the US. And we have a few international clients as well, but we can take care of people right from the comfort of their home.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was really good. I felt like we could have kept going. No, I mean, that was great. I mean, thank you so much.
Oh, thank
Do
you.
you have about 2 more minutes? I'd like to record like a couple little shorts that we could turn into Instagram reels or something like
Yeah.
that. That work for
Yeah.
you?
Let me just
All
check.
right,
Let me
cool.
just check one.
So there are a couple things. One, I was thinking, like the whole mouth breathing thing is, I've heard that a few times, but the way you broke it down, I think was really helpful. Do you think, like, what I was thinking is I could ask you about it, and could you turn that discussion of the importance of nasal breathing versus mouth breathing into like a 40-second response, something like that?
Okay. So you want me to talk about the difference between nasal and mouth breathing?
Yeah, and why nasal breathing is so important, or actually why mouth breathing is detrimental. So I'll tee it up with a
Okay.
question, and then we'll go from
And
there.
how
Right?
long do you want the
Okay.
answer? 45 seconds?
Yeah, like 40, 45
Okay,
seconds, something
sure.
like that.
Thanks,
Yeah.
John.
All right. All right. So the term mouth breather is usually derogatory and insulting, right? But it seems like it goes even further than that. So what's wrong with mouth breathing?
It's a great question, John, because the way we breathe is actually very deterministic in our immune health, in our oral health, in our cognitive health, in our cardiovascular health. And so, one of the first things I want to encourage everyone to do if they're on their own health journey is to really focus on the way they breathe. When we breathe through our nose, we increase nitric oxide production. We increase the pressurization of the air. We get 20% more oxygen from every breath we take. We temperature regulate the air, we moisture regulate the air, we cleanse the air of particulates, viruses, and bacteria as well, so that the air is perfected before it goes into our lungs, which has its own immune system. It has its own microbiome. So our immune system actually starts in our nose, and it serves as a protective and air optimizing organ that is often overlooked on the health journey. And with our breath, we can also regulate our nervous system. When we breathe through our mouth, it increases cavities, it decreases nitric oxide production, increases periodontal disease, increases bad breath, increases cavities. In fact, mouth breathing is the number one cause of cavities, and it actually changes the way we taste food. So people require more sugar to taste the sweetness of their meal um, because of the way they breathe. And when we breathe through our mouth, it signals to our nervous system that we're in fight or flight. So it's hard to feel relaxed. We feel low grade anxiety, and we don't feel our best selves when we breathe through our mouth.
Lots of good reasons not to be a mouth breather. Absolutely. Great. Cool. So one more. So I just had two more
Sure.
questions for you. Is that you have time? Okay, good. So I think everybody talks about morning routines, but I think your discussion about the end of day routine really helpful. So I'll tee that up
Okay.
for you. Okay. There's a lot of people talking about morning routines, especially for entrepreneurs, but I know the end of day routine is just as important.
Yeah, one thing I found that really helped, and I don't know where I got this from, so you'll have to excuse me for not giving credit, but it was to look at your evening as the beginning of tomorrow. So
Mm,
looking at how I'm going to improve my quality of sleep tonight as a beginning and determining factor of how I'm going to feel tomorrow. And that little switch of my perception and paradigm made all the difference. Few things that people can do is making sure they're avoiding screens at least an hour before bed, avoiding food 2 to 3 hours before bed, not drinking too many liquids, and of course caffeine leading up to the evening, and really controlling their lighting environment is a huge determining factor in their internal hormone production. Their production of melatonin and cortisol, etc., is based on the lighting information they're receiving. So after the sun goes down, definitely no food. Try to minimize or reduce or eliminate your exposure to blue and green light. You can wear blue blockers, turn off all the overhead lighting, and only use red lights after the sun goes down. Those are a few things that can make a huge difference in people's sleep quality. Also, among that would be taping their mouth at night, because that makes a huge difference in their health and recovery.
awesome. All right, cool. One more. So this will be just like a why should somebody listen, right? So I'll just tee it up with a question. Good. All right, cool. So Sachin, if an entrepreneur is feeling overwhelmed, out of alignment, or just curious about what it means to activate their inner healer, what would you say to them, and why should they listen to this conversation?
One of the things that I want for everyone who's listening to this conversation is to realize that we are our greatest doctor. We are our own surgeon, our own pharmacy, and we have this gift that we've been given, which is this medicine inside of us. And we can
Mm,
unlock that when we create the right environment externally and internally, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and create an amazing life that's healthy, happy, and whole for our entire lives. And so when you listen to this conversation, you're really going to get a deeper understanding of how powerful you are and simple things that you can do to and immediately put this conversation into action to start feeling better within hours or days, not months or years.
that was great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My
Amazing.
pleasure.